Sunday night, February 1st, 2026, Trevor Noah is hosting the Grammys for the fifth and final time. Billie Eilish just won Song of the Year. The audience is celebrating. Noah steps to the microphone and says, "That is a Grammy that every artist wants, almost as much as Trump wants Greenland," which makes sense because Epstein's island is gone. He needs a new one to hang out with Bill Clinton. The audience laughs. Noah grins and adds, "I told you it's my last year. What are you going to do about it?" It's 10:47 p.m. Pacific time. Within hours, the internet explodes. But by 10:01 a.m. the next morning, something unprecedented happens. Trump posts a 300-word legal threat on Truth Social. Not a dismissal, not a laugh, a declaration of war. He writes, "Noah said incorrectly about me that Donald Trump and Bill Clinton spent time on Epstein Island. Wrong. I have never been to Epstein Island, nor anywhere close, and until tonight's false and defamatory statement have never been accused of being there." Then comes the threat. "Noah, a total loser, better get his facts straight and get them straight fast. It looks like I'll be sending my lawyers to sue this poor, pathetic, talentless dope and suing him for plenty. Ask little George Stephanopoulos how that worked out. Get ready, Noah. I'm going to have some fun with you." Trump's referencing his recent victories. ABC News paid him $15 million. CBS paid $16 million, so he's feeling invincible. But here is what nobody is connecting. This lawsuit threat came exactly 3 days after Trump's own Justice Department released over 3 million pages of Epstein files. Files where Trump's name appears more than 3,000 times. And here is what they are really not telling you, while the government is selectively releasing. Epstein files, another case with nearly identical patterns, is unfolding in real time. Sean Diddy Combs is sitting in federal custody facing charges that mirror the Epstein playbook almost perfectly. Let me show you something the media isn't connecting. On September 16, 2024, Sean Diddy Combs was arrested by federal agents in New York. The charges: racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution. The indictment describes decades of alleged abuse. It talks about freak-offs, elaborate sexual performances Diddy allegedly orchestrated, recorded, and used as leverage. It describes a pattern of using wealth, power, and connections to create a system where young women and men were allegedly exploited, intimidated, and silenced. Sound familiar? Because that's almost word for word the pattern described in the Epstein files. Both cases involve powerful men in entertainment and business circles. Both involve allegations of using private properties for illegal activities. Both involve claims of recording compromising material. Both involve networks of enablers, assistants, and associates who allegedly facilitated the abuse. And here's the critical connection. Both cases involve the same question: who else knew? Who else was involved? And why did it take so long for federal prosecutors to act? Diddy's currently in custody awaiting trial. He's been denied bail twice. Meanwhile, the Epstein files reveal that powerful figures connected to Epstein walked free for nearly 2 decades while prosecutors had evidence. The difference: Epstein's connections reached into politics, finance, and royalty. Diddy's connections reach into entertainment, music, and celebrity culture. But the institutional protection, the delayed justice, the selective prosecution, it's the same pattern playing out again. The timeline is everything, and the timeline exposes the cover-up. November 19, 2025, President Trump signs the Epstein Files Transparency Act into law. It passed the House for 2-7-1, passed the Senate unanimously. The law gave Attorney General Pam Bondi 30 days to release all unclassified DOJ files related to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. The deadline: December 19, 2025. What did the DOJ do? They released roughly 500 pages. Less than 1% of what they had collected. Congress passes a law with near unanimous support. The president signs it, and the Department of Justice misses its own legally mandated deadline by a country mile. Fast forward to January 30th, 2026. 6 weeks late, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche holds a press conference. He announces the big release: 3 million pages, 2,000 videos, 180,000 images. But here's the problem. Blanche admits they reviewed over 6 million pages. That means roughly 2.5 million pages are still being withheld, and he calls it full compliance from a prosecutor's perspective. That's not transparency. That's a controlled release. And then 3 days later, Trevor Noah makes his joke on national television. But here is what makes this even more suspicious. While the DOJ is controlling the narrative on Epstein, drip-feeding information from cases that are decades old, they're simultaneously prosecuting Diddy with overwhelming speed and force. Diddy was arrested, indicted, and denied bail in a matter of weeks. Epstein's case took years to even reach a courtroom, and many of his alleged co-conspirators were never charged at all. Why the different approach? Why the urgency in one case and the delay in another? Let's talk about what the DOJ did release, because it explains why Trump went nuclear over a comedian's joke. The files include emails where Epstein and his associates shared news articles about Trump. They include photographs of Trump at Epstein's Manhattan townhouse and Palm Beach residence. They include testimony from Trump's own Mar-a-Lago butler saying Trump and Epstein socialized frequently. Here is the document that made headlines: a 2020 email from the Southern District of New York stating Donald Trump traveled An Epstein's private jet many more times than previously has been reported or that we were aware. Trump's name appears more than 3,000 times across these documents. Now, let's be clear. Trump has never been charged with any crime related to Epstein. Neither has Bill Clinton. Both men deny any knowledge of Epstein's criminal activities. But the connection, the documented social relationship, the flight logs, the photographs, they're all there in black and white, released by Trump's own Justice Department. And there's something else that should stop every legal analyst cold. The Dodge wrote in their press release that some documents contain untrue and sensationalist claims against President Trump that were unfounded and false. They said if those claims had a shred of credibility, they certainly would have been weaponized against President Trump already. That statement is extraordinary. The Department of Justice, in an official press release, preemptively characterized the credibility of information in files they were legally required to release. They didn't just release documents, they told you what to think about them before you even read them. That is not how the Dodge operates. You release the evidence, you let the evidence speak. You do not editorialize about whether information is true or false. Compare that to the Diddy case the Dodge released a detailed indictment with. Specific allegations, witness testimony, and evidence, no editorial commentary, no preemptive dismissals, just the facts presented to a grand jury that returned charges. So why the different standard? Why does Diddy get a straightforward prosecution while Epstein's files come with a government disclaimer about what is credible? Here is what connects Epstein and Diddy beyond the allegations. Both men operated at the center of networks that included some of the most powerful people in the world. Epstein's Black Book reportedly contained contact information for presidents, princes, CEOs, and celebrities. His social circle included Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew, and dozens of other influential figures. His parties were legendary. His connections were his currency. Diddy's world was similar. Decades of industry parties, celebrity gatherings, connections to musicians, actors, athletes, and business moguls. His Bad Boy Records empire gave him access to power structures across entertainment and beyond. And here's the uncomfortable truth. In both cases, there were rumors, whispers, and allegations for years before anything happened. People knew, people talked, but nothing moved forward until it became impossible to ignore. With Epstein, it took investigative journalism by the Miami Herald and relentless advocacy by victims' attorneys to force the Dodge's hand. With Diddy, it took Cassie Ventura's lawsuit in November 2023, followed by a flood of additional allegations before federal prosecutors stepped in. The pattern is clear. The justice system doesn't proactively protect victims when powerful men are involved. It reacts only when public pressure becomes overwhelming. And that raises the most disturbing question. How many other cases are out there right now where prosecutors have evidence, where victims have come forward, but nothing happens because the person involved is too connected, too wealthy, too powerful? Here's why Trump's lawsuit threat is legally catastrophic for him. What Noah said wasn't a news report making a factual assertion. It was a joke at an awards show by a comedian in front of millions of witnesses who understood it as satire, and satire about public figures has different legal protections than news reporting. To win a defamation suit, Trump would need to prove for elements that Noah made a false statement, that it was about Trump, that it was published to third parties, and that it caused damage to Trump's reputation. But Trump's not a private citizen. He's the president of the United States. That means he must prove actual malice, a specific legal term meaning Noah either knew the statement was false or acted with reckless disregard for whether it was true. Here is the problem. You can't prove actual malice for a statement that is obviously a joke. In 1988, the Supreme Court addressed this exact issue in Hustler magazine v. Falwell. Hustler published a parody suggesting televangelist Jerry Falwell had an incestuous encounter with his mother in an outhouse. Falwell sued for defamation. The court ruled unanimously that parody, no matter how outrageous, cannot be defamation if no reasonable person would believe it's asserting actual facts. Apply that to Noah's joke. Did any reasonable person watching the Grammys believe Noah was reporting a verified fact? Or were they watching a comedian making a satirical comment about Trump's documented friendship with Jeffrey Epstein? The audience laughed. That's evidence they understood it as humor, not reportage. But here's the real disaster for Trump. If he actually files this lawsuit, he opens the door to discovery. And discovery in a case like this could expose not just Epstein connections, but potentially connections to other cases with similar patterns, including the questions surrounding who knew what about Diddy's alleged activities. None of this is new. The pattern of the Dodge shielding powerful people from accountability in the Epstein case has been playing out for almost 20 years. In 2005, the Palm Beach Police Department opened an investigation into Jeffrey Epstein after a parent reported he had sexually abused her 14-year-old daughter. By 2007, the FBI had taken over. A prosecutor named Marie Villafad drafted a 60-count federal indictment: sex trafficking, enticement of a minor, conspiracy. She sent it up the chain. The Dodge's child exploitation and obscenity section in Washington reviewed her work and called it exhaustive and well done. And then U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta shut it down. Acosta entered into a non-prosecution agreement with Epstein. Under that deal, Epstein pleaded guilty to 2-state prostitution charges in Florida. He served 13 months in a county jail with work release privileges that let him leave the facility up to 16 hours a day. Here is the part that should make every prosecutor sick. The agreement granted immunity not just to Epstein, but to his co-conspirators. It essentially shut down the FBI's investigation. And the deal was kept secret from the victims. Federal law required that victims be notified. Acosta agreed in writing to keep the deal confidential. The girls never got a chance to show up in court. In 2020, the Doge's Office of Professional Responsibility released its findings. They said Acosta showed poor judgment, not misconduct, not corruption, poor judgment. And because Acosta had already left government, there was nothing anyone could do. This set a precedent. A federal prosecutor can look at 60 counts of sex trafficking against one of the most connected men in the country and decide the case isn't worth pursuing, and the system doesn't stop him. Now fast forward to 2024. And the Diddy case, this time federal prosecutors moved quickly. They executed search warrants on his properties in Los Angeles and Miami. They gathered evidence. They brought charges. They're pushing for trial. What changed? The difference isn't the evidence. Both cases had substantial evidence early on. The difference is public awareness and political will. After Epstein, after the outcry over Acosta's deal, after the embarrassment of letting a serial predator walk free, prosecutors couldn't afford another sweetheart deal for a powerful celebrity. Diddy is facing the accountability Epstein should have faced 20 years ago, but that doesn't answer the question. Who else is still being protected? The same day Todd Blanche declared full compliance, members of Congress from both sides started asking the same question. What about the other 2.5 million pages? Representative Ro Khanna, one of the authors of the law, said the DOJ identified over 6 million potentially responsive pages, but is only releasing about 3.5 million. He wants to know why the rest are being withheld. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer immediately demanded to know whether every single document mentioning Trump had been released, whether all the co-conspirator memos had been released. On January 31st, Representative Jamie Raskin sent a formal letter to Deputy AG Blanche requesting an in-person review of the unredacted files. His letter was blunt. He wrote that the DOJ identified over 6 million pages but released only about half and then strangely claimed full compliance. Here's what makes Raskin's letter so powerful. He quoted the statute directly. The law says materials can only be withheld to protect victims' personally identifiable information, not on the basis of embarrassment, reputational harm, or political sensitivity, including to any government official, public figure, or foreign dignitary. That language is explicit. It puts the burden squarely on the DOJ to justify. Every single page they didn't release. Attorney General Pam Bondi is scheduled to appear before the House Judiciary Committee on February 11th. That hearing is going to be one of the most consequential moments in this saga because that's where the DOJ will have to explain under oath exactly what they withheld and why, and members of Congress are already drawing connections between the Epstein files and other ongoing cases. If prosecutors withheld information about Epstein's co-conspirators for 20 years, what does that mean for current investigations? What does it mean for the Diddy case where similar questions about enablers and accomplices remain unanswered? The institutional failure in the Epstein case didn't just let one man escape justice. It created a blueprint for how powerful people can operate with impunity as long as they are connected enough. Here's where we are right now. The DOJ has released Epstein documents, but not everything. Congress is pushing back. The Attorney General is about to testify under oath. Trump has threatened to sue a comedian over a joke. And Diddy is sitting in federal custody while questions about who else was involved in both cases remain unanswered. Will Trump actually file his lawsuit? Will Noah fight back? Will this become a historic First Amendment case? And more importantly, will the February 11th hearing force the DOJ to explain why 2.5 million pages of Epstein files are still hidden? The next 2 weeks are critical, not because of headlines or social media outrage, but because the legal and institutional battles playing out right now will determine whether accountability applies equally or whether justice depends on how powerful you are. There's an irony Trump didn't see coming. By threatening to sue over a joke, he's drawn attention to the very files he wanted people to ignore. Millions are now searching Trump-Epstein files and discovering the connections for themselves. And here's the bigger picture. The Epstein case and the Diddy case aren't isolated incidents. They're symptoms of a system where wealth and power create immunity from consequences, where prosecutors delay and hedge and protect the connected while victims wait years for justice. The real story isn't what was released on January 30th. The real story is what happens when you try to control the truth and a comedian makes a joke that exposes the whole charade. What happens next will define whether we live in a country where power answers to law or law serves power. The Diddy prosecution suggests things might be changing, but the Epstein files with their redactions and omissions and editorial disclaimers suggest the old patterns of protection are still very much alive. The answer matters for everyone who believes in accountability, transparency, and equal justice under law.